Okay, good morning to everybody. You're very welcome to this morning's webinar, Countdown to Brexit, 100 days to go. Well, with all that's happened this year, it's easy to forget that the Brexit transition period is set to end in 100 days from today, the 22nd of September, well, very close to it, on the 31st of December 2020. And as organisations turn their attention from COVID-19 responses to look ahead to 2021, it's hardly surprising that Brexit is rapidly rising up the business agenda and Northern Ireland has unique challenges ahead. Look, we're delighted that so many of you could join us here today. And I'm really looking forward to our session this morning. I'm delighted to welcome Andrew Fleming of Fleming Steel, Dr. Trevor Cadden of Ulster University Business School, Seamus Leahy of Logistics UK, and Deirdre Maguire of Intertrade Ireland. And together we're hoping to update you on what practical steps you and your business can take to prepare for Brexit. We certainly don't have all the answers, but we can share what we know now. We intend to hold a series of webinars on this topic between now and the end of the year in an effort to keep you, our members, up to date with the latest guidance. If you'd like to send a text message in or send a question, you can do it to the text box at the bottom of the screen, and we'll endeavour to answer those questions as we go through the session this morning. So before we make a start, I was wondering, could you put your microphones on mute? This will ensure we minimise interference, and I'd like to just introduce the expert panel this morning. So Andrew Fleming, MD Group Business as MD of a group business in St. Johnson and Donegal and across the border in Oma, largely servicing engineering, agricultural and construction sectors. Fleming Steel is steel stockholders, Fleming Doors, their manufacturer of supply of roller shutter doors and personal doors, Fleming Coatings, industrial powder coating, and Norwest Roofing, industrial and agricultural roofing wholesaler. And Andrew has been a Londonderry Chamber member since 2017. So you're very welcome, Andrew, and thanks so much for taking the time out to support and your continued support of the Chamber. Dr. Trevor Cadden, Ulster University Business School. Dr. Trevor Cadden is an experienced operations and supply chain manager and is currently a senior lecturer in operations and supply chain management at Ulster University Business School. He had 12 years of industrial experience in the manufacturing industry prior to his academic career, covering a range of supply chain management systems, implementation and business improvement roles. And Dr. Cadden has an extensive experience in supply chain systems and process development in both large and small organizations. Locally, nationally and internationally, he continues to work closely with SMEs, developing their supply chains and processes. And Dr. Cadden is a black belt in Lean Six Sigma, something I had some experience in my previous role about, Dr. So very interesting to hear about that. And the industry standard charter mark for business process improvement and excellence. Delighted also to have Seamus Leahy, Logistics UK, with us as well. Seamus, we found out, is a man from Buncrana who's done a bit of travelling over this period. Seamus is the policy manager for Logistics UK in Northern Ireland, representing the interests of business involved in all elements of logistics, supply chains and transport. Seamus' work involves regular engagement with national and local government on a wide range of policy matters ranging from Brexit, compliance, sustainable transport and infrastructure. And prior to working for Logistics UK, Seamus worked in the European and deep sea shipping industry, representing various shipping companies based in Belfast Port, gaining valuable experience in supply chains administration and customs protocols for various trade flows. And it's interesting how important and how critical the whole supply chain is going to be come Brexit. And I think we're going to really touch on that in great detail during the session. And last but not least, Deirdre Maguire from Intertrade Ireland. Deirdre has a wide range of experience working with SMEs, is a Bachelor of Financial Services. She previously worked with Ulster Bank in both retail and in business banking for over 20 years and are in a range of positions. She then worked in the manufacturing sector with Norbrook Laboratories and then with MJM Marine Group, and now manages the Intertrade Ireland Brexit Advisory Service and is working closely with SMEs, sharing the detail of supports available through Brexit and COVID. And that's so critical as well. And we'll touch on Invest NI, I think, as well, and other supports that may be there as well for businesses north and south of the border. So Deirdre, you're very, very welcome, and thank you so much for joining. So look, we've got through the formalities of the introductions now for the panel. Delighted that you could all join us and really looking forward to the session. But maybe, Andrew, I could talk with you first as somebody who's running a business on both sides of the border and working as a seamless border, if you like, and have been for many, many years. Could you just give us an overview of how the border is affecting you currently or how you're operating?
Yeah, like a lot of businesses in this region, the border has in some gone a long way to define what we are. We, as a group of businesses, I suppose, shouldn't be confused with Fleming Agri, who are in new buildings. A lot of you will know that business. It's the same family, but and it's very much, and this business very much a product of the border back originating back in the mid 80s when essentially it was, well, we need to set up something in the north, and my uncle and Owen took that business on that way. Here in Donegal, we, as I say, have been defined by the border. We have lots of disadvantages around what that's now seen as border is and was, but lots of advantages too. And we've taken a view over the last few years, really, of trying to extract the advantages of having a border, whether that's exchange rate or tax regime or whatnot, and getting the most out of it. And I think a lot of businesses will have done that too. And hence we bought into and acquired into a business in Noma, and that just sort of almost hedged our risk. So in some ways, unbeknownst to ourselves, we've been preparing for an extension of what the border might be or might mean through Brexit, and perhaps been quite fortunate in that regard, and that we've been preparing in a holistic way without knowing what was to come.
Okay, and in terms of you mitigating, or as you touched on there about having the business in Noma as well, are there any other things you've done as well to mitigate the risk to cross, with Brexit coming down the stream, and any other changes you've made within your business?
Well, I think we'll probably touch on it with the others, but certainly looking at the supply chains and making sure that we've got the right bank accounts in the right area. Obviously, the tick box exercises of having the right URI numbers and having a good understanding of what we know to date. Up to this point, and perhaps not panicking is the other thing that we're trying not to do. We're trying to be as efficient as possible, so that whenever extra burden or work comes our way, or potentially opportunity comes our way, that we've got the capacity to deal with it. And that's probably the single biggest thing that we're trying to understand and to achieve at the moment, along with just understanding what our supply chain is going to look like. And as I say, that's been almost part of an evolutionary process for us, is widening our supply chain, both north and south of the border here, but also into the UK and Europe, so that we're basically all bases are covered in terms of how we get access to stocks, etc.
And in terms of product flow, do you have much product flow across the jurisdictions that you during the manufacturing process, or is it mostly all manufactured St. Johnson, or do you have to do elements in Oma, or do you move product over that, and that would have an impact as well, I guess?
We have product moving similar to some of the examples that have been given around Brexit and the problems. We might move across the border 4 or 5 times with one product in terms of the manufacture of the components and whatnot. So I've estimated, I think I did a quick tally between myself and the trucks and whatnot, we're crossing the border 60 to 70 times per week. Just one way or another. So obviously the hard border issue was a major thing, for everybody, but for us in particular in terms of our ongoing operation. If that's not on the cards, which I don't think we can absolutely rule it out, but hopefully it's not really there. Then we feel that we'll be in a strong enough position to be able to hopefully take advantage of whatever opportunities may exist. And we're hoping that this region, which very much deserves a break in the annals of history, gets one, whether that's Donegal or Northern Ireland or the Northwest region in particular.
Okay, Andrew, look, thanks a million for that, and we'll come back to you later in the session. Thanks so much for that update. Maybe if I could move on to you, Trevor, if that's okay. I see you're on mute there, so if you could come off mute. Yeah, from your recent work on supply chain management, like what is it called, a review of SME cross-border supply chain management supports on the island, you looked at the size and value of business involved in cross-border trade and the key supply chain supports for businesses across the island of Ireland, and the key supplying capabilities and issues. Who did you question in the study, and what were your main findings from that report, Trevor?
Hi, hello, Paul, and everyone listening in. Just a backdrop to the report is really, it's interesting that in terms of a recent study that we did on supply chain resilience and disruption, because in a sense we're living in a world of disruption, albeit it's more amplified in recent times with COVID and obviously Brexit, but disruption as a word appears in the supply chain as a constant, if you like. And the study that we did is over 500 companies, cross-border, at all sizes. We found that a year ago, 90% said Brexit was their main problem and the main disruptions they were having. And then Brexit, this haven't gone away, you know, Northern Ireland quote. Now, the one we did 3 weeks ago, it came back with nobody saying Brexit was an issue, but 90% saying COVID was an issue. So in many ways, businesses jump to whatever's loudest at the time and whatever is most immediate to them. And I kind of look at it like in a hierarchy of needs. Whereas Brexit's your bread and water, the COVID crisis is a bit like your oxygen. And firms at the minute are saying, well, I have to breathe first and make sure I have a business. And then Brexit is something that I worry about. But I guess what we want to do this morning and through this process is realize that they aren't they are, again, in Northern Ireland, they're inextricably linked in a way, that disruption crosses the various types of challenges, both COVID and Brexit. And that's where the supply chain management element of this is incredibly critical. If you look at the findings that we did in our recent study, where we had 306 firms that were involved in cross-border trade, and then we carried that out with follow-up 20 in-depth case studies. And it was really interesting that 69% of firms don't have any sort of digital linkages with their suppliers across the supply chain. Now, given that if you take the Northern Ireland ROI, almost 800,000 transactions every year, with 410,000 imports, and the majority of those small and micro businesses in under €4,000, then actually not having that linkage is a critical area it needs to be focused on. Building on that slightly, if we look at I have this new phrase that data is the new oil, and in the area of Brexit, and we talk about now moving into ports, and Seamus will, I'm sure, touch on this much more than I will, but the fact that this pre-lodgement reference number has to be completed 24 hours before you arrive at the port. And if you have a commodity, then obviously you've got to have all the right piece of data. Some of that reside with hauliers, some of it reside with importers, some of it reside with manufacturers. But it's a bit like, in my head, like filling in your passport, and you have all the different requirements that you have to have in there. And if they're not in there, it's sent right back to you. And what we're hearing from the ferry companies is that you'll be turned away at the terminal before you actually, if you don't have that reference number in place, which is a slight behavioural change to maybe what some people rock up at the minute without all that data. So having that right information in the right place along your supply chain is going to be critical. Now, obviously that's supported by the trader support system, where the £200 million investment by the government, and then about another 155 million on the infrastructure side of it. But how much of that will actually filter down to the ground, and how much on day one will be ready to go? Given that we're 100 days out, Seamus probably knows more than that than I do. So I guess my message is to start. We'll come back the 5 a day, if you like. I can go through those now, if you like, Paul.
Yes,
or if you
please, do actually, that'll be, I think that's very poignant actually, and relevant. Yeah, please do.
Yeah, when I teach students, we always try to get them in a kind of visual zone and say that, I'm going to give you your 5 a day. And today it's more of a visual 5 a day, but the 5 things that I would encourage firms to do in the current climate is, number one is, as Andrew has said, is make sure you're registered for the EORI number. Number two is make sure that you're registered for the trader support services, the registration of that, because that'll give you at the minute updates of everything that's going on. Number three is checking the resources that are out there. There's a lot of different organisations have invested a lot of time. I've worked with Intertrade Ireland, Manufacturing NI, and developing supply chain resources. So those are really two really good places to start. Invest NI have got really good resources. IBEC have got some resources. And actually, if you're in the services sector, then Department of Economy have a really good resource, because the OECD element, which breaks down services into 4 different modes, has a services trade restrictiveness index there that firms can fill in their information, understand across 44 countries and 22 service sectors, which actually service sectors in those countries are open for business. It comes back, it applies an algorithm, and actually in Northern Ireland we're not that keen on algorithms, because we did that with initially with our GCSE and A-level results. It was an uproar.
It wasn't a great success,
yeah, but we're told these algorithms are better, and what they do is they come back with a 0 to 1 scale, 0 being that it's open, or 0 rather that it's open for trade, and 1 that it's not, and there's a scale along that. So that's the useful one. The fourth one is mapping your supply chain, and that's really important, is to knowing where your trade flows are, where your product flows are, and importantly where your information flows are. If you take, for example, some manufacturer that's maybe in the textile industry and maybe getting materials from both South Korea and India, they may not know that directly, because they may be getting it south or north of the border, which we've got free trade, and it may be east or west, which we talk about the unfettered access. But in essence, if there's a second tier supplier who supplies someone in the UK or ROI with some of that material, then South Korea, there isn't an agreement with them at the moment, because they want a better deal than they had under EU, because they felt that they gave a lot of leverage to the EU at that point. And then you have India, who are looking for worker mobility rights, because there's 100,000 illegal immigrants in the UK who, and there's the post-study work visa issue. So it's kind of complicated around that, but that may affect your business. So it's understanding what risks you have. Andrew talked about earlier on about currency fluctuations, and as Brexit draws near, that the pound may get weaker, and that may have an impact. So another area to look at. And I suppose finally then is just looking at the various elements of risk within your business overall, be it to do with delays, to do with disruption, or to do with IT.
Okay, Trevor.
That's your 5 a day.
That's a 5 a day, and that's brilliant, and look great, and great reference there to those. I think what we might do, we'll come back, Trevor, maybe to you, because I know there was a question we were going just about materials that are available that you've generated, which I think can really be helpful to point direction. We'll come back to that, but maybe Seamus, I could come on to you, please, if that's okay.
Hi, Paul. Yes.
Yeah, I'm just going to ask, did the government and industry explored or requested any derogations for GB to NI trade that would make things easier? Or is that where you'd like to start with?
Yeah, I suppose, on the doors, everything Trevor said, that 5 a day is a good starting point for any business. The Trader Support Service was recently awarded. That was awarded to Fujitsu, who I think have a presence as well up in the Northwest. It's going to be a 2-year service free of charge. And in essence, basically, the government is nationalising customs services for a 2-year period here, which is quite unthinkable, really. Because not only will it cater for import declarations for goods coming from GB to Northern Ireland, but under WTO rules, it will also cover import declarations for goods coming from third countries. So if you're a business today and you're importing goods from the US or China, you can actually avail of the TSS to do the import declarations for you from the 1st of January at no cost.
Wow.
So you can see there were some businesses who were very unhappy with this, obviously customs agents, but I think where that will be offset is that the TSS will likely have to subcontract a lot of work to local customs agents anyway. So hopefully there should be a continuity of trade for them. The derogations that we've been looking for, we've had a lot of meetings. Yesterday evening, actually, we had a meeting with the Irish Department of Foreign Affairs, myself and a couple of other business groups. And the one thing we've been pushing for really with the UK government and the EU side is what we would call dead-end hosts. So it's goods coming into Northern Ireland where there is evidence that those goods cannot go, because of the internal systems of the business, cannot go to the single market, to the Republic of Ireland, for example. So goods come in, let's say, for the large retailers, new cars coming in the car showrooms, things like that, that if I'm taking in 20 trailers a day for Tesco or Sainsbury's or Asda, that there's systems in place where those goods, Sainsbury's are not going to be selling that chicken that they bring into Northern Ireland to someone else in the Republic, and to be traceability. So we want that offset, because 65% of the freight that comes in here is for the retail and wholesale trade by value. So it's significant. If we can deal with that, it means basically our resources can be looked at the other things. The other then is internet shopping, goods coming in parcel deliveries, the likes of Yodel, FedEx, Amazon. Again, those businesses, how they differentiate if a delivery is going to either Derry or Donegal, is that if it's got a BT postcode when it comes into Heathrow or the East Midlands Airport, if it's got a BT postcode, it goes on the lorry to Belfast. And if it's a Donegal address, it goes on the lorry going to Dublin. And it's simple like that. So again, we're hoping for some type of mitigation for that, where those companies can consign all the goods to themselves in Northern Ireland and then go on. But the journey, the big change we're faced with is buying goods from Great Britain coming into Northern Ireland from the 1st of January. And I suppose if I just kind of quickly run through what that journey will look like, there's various steps. So the first thing you look at is that the GB supplier will raise the commercial invoice, and they'll charge UK VAT just as normal as they do today. There will be no export declaration required for those goods leaving Great Britain. So your supplier in England, Scotland, and Wales doesn't have to do any customs. If the goods that you're buying, however, from GB is like agri-food, if it's SPS, if it's plant or of animal origin, a sanitary or phytosanitary export health certificate will have to be completed. Now that can be quite a burden because that requires veterinary approval on documentation, and the cost as well. An example, I checked with East Lincolnshire local authority in England, which is a big food producing area. They charge £119 an hour to complete an an export health certificate. So if a vet's going to go to your supplier's address to sign off on goods, and he's there for a couple of hours, that can fairly amount up.
For sure.
So then you're looking at them, basically the goods, a safety security declaration is required for all trailers, all vehicles coming into Northern Ireland from Great Britain. That's required 2 hours before arrival into Larne, Belfast or Warrenpoint. Also pre-notification of those SPS goods as well. So that needs to be notified before the ship sails from GB. That means basically the DERA officials, vets here, if there's something that's red flag that raises concerns, that they can direct their resources to the port to check those goods as well. You just can't spring it on them. However, this is where the customs part comes in for Northern Ireland, is that an import declaration has to be pre-lodged into the customs. It's a system called CDS. It's a pretty new system, and it's really unproven really for this volume of work. So you as the business here in Northern Ireland will be responsible for that import declaration. You'll need that commercial invoice from your supplier in GB. And that import declaration has to be completed before the goods sail from Great Britain. So, you could be leaving yourself short of time if you're not only given the details, the commodity codes, the invoice until the lorry's loaded, and you've got a lorry being loaded in Liverpool and then it's catching a ferry 2 hours later, you're really up against it for time on this. So it's all about planning this, speaking to your supplier, speaking to your logistics provider, and just linking in that everything's going to be pretty seamless there. Because what happens when the driver, let's say the lorry driver goes to a factory in Manchester to lift a pallet of goods for you as a business in Derry, the driver will ask for that import declaration reference. You can either get it from you indirectly, or the trader in Manchester can give it to the driver, the logistics provider, because he's been given it by the customer. So the driver makes a note of that number, and the driver's going to use a software system called the Goods Vehicle Movement Service. And this will be an app. It'll be an app like the driver will have it on a smartphone, an Android, an iPad, whatever. So the driver will put in that declaration reference. The driver will also put in the safety security reference. And then the driver will also have to put in the transit details. So the port of exit from GB, the port of arrival, Northern Ireland, and the sailing times. And when the drivers put all that data into this app, it gives them what's called a goods movement reference. And that'll be a little serial code, or it could be even scanned. And when the driver arrives at, let's say, Stena Line or P&O, the staff will ask him, right, can we see your reference? The driver gives it to them, and then they scan that and they upload it to the customs system. And it tells them immediately, green or red, whether the goods are permitted to enter the terminal. So if you haven't completed your customs at all, or there's something missing, the vehicle will be declined entry to the port. And this is where we foresee, this is the big fear for us, is we have tailbacks of trucks at the ports. A place like Cairnryan has no capacity at all for tailbacks, so the Scottish government are pretty concerned about this. So that's basically the journey so far. Once the ship is ready to sail, all those reference codes that the drivers have given when they've clocked in is uploaded to HMRC. They do a quick algorithm check on that, and then they notify you, the consignees in Northern Ireland, whether your goods have got the green light to proceed. When they arrive into Belfast or Larne, they can continue on their journey, or if there's either a customs issue, they may want to pull the goods in for some type of double check on that, but more than likely it'll be SPS checks. HMRC envisaged the level of customs checks will maybe around 1 or 2% of loads coming in. Whereas SPS, depending on what type of trade agreement the UK has with the EU, can be anything from 5 to 30% of loads getting checked.
It could have a massive impact then in terms of flow of trucks through the ports.
Exactly, yeah.
Even at 1 or 2%, it's going to be a problem. If it increases beyond that, that sounds like that could be a potential. Just in terms of systems, are these systems in place now? What you're describing there, and thanks, it's a brilliant visual description you're giving of the journey of a pallet, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
Are these systems to be designed? Are they the HMRC link? Is that up and running?
They're working at the moment. I got 3 local members here, hauliers in Northern Ireland, are currently taking place in a pilot exercise using the GVMS. My concern, I've said to them, I think they can deliver the software. You know, at the end of the day, they were able to turn around systems quite quickly with COVID, with the furloughing scheme, with civils, things like that. So when they put their minds to it, they can do it. The testing maybe is a bit of a concern because Great Britain will only implement full customs checks from potentially from the 1st of July next year. They're going to have a phased introduction, but Northern Ireland's doing it from the 1st of January. And HMRC didn't want to move that because, let's face it, they're going to use this place as the pilot exercise, and they're going to iron out the problems. They're going to learn from the problems they encounter with Northern Ireland, and then make sure that those problems aren't encountered at Dover. So we're the guinea pig, unfortunately, Paul. Okay,
but just a final one, Seamus, before I go on to Deirdre there, is waiting patiently, Deirdre, so thanks very much. If a no deal happens, what happens with the Irish border on that? I mean, if we have an issue with the protocol, do the things you described change in any great way?
It shouldn't change, because even under a no deal, the withdrawal agreement is still there. Because when we talk about no deal, we're talking about no trade deal. So the withdrawal agreement still says the protocol is in place. HMRC's their plan is that there will be no checks or no controls on anything crossing the Irish border. The EU may decide to do something on the Republic of Ireland side. The problem with that is that you create a system then, basically an unlevel playing field, where goods can come into Northern Ireland without any regulatory controls or tariffs, but going the other way, they will face that friction. So it'd be quite frustrating for businesses here. But also the loophole you create is that Northern Ireland then becomes potentially a backdoor into Great Britain to avoid tariffs and controls as well. So it is flawed, that scenario.
Okay, and maybe we'll touch on that with Trevor as well and Andrew as well later in the discussion. But Deirdre, can I come on to you, and thanks so much for being so patient there. So just in terms of what should businesses be doing now to be prepared for Brexit, Deirdre?
Okay, so I think the first thing to say and to acknowledge is that every business is different. and some will have planned, some will not. Some will be in the logistics side of things, some will be in manufacturing, some will be in services. So the first thing I would say to a business is, the first thing is to identify your risk. So there are two things that I would suggest that you would do. First of all, look at your trade and goods, and the second thing, look at your trade and services. So it kind of pulls together some of the points that we've already mentioned. So if you go into trade and goods, okay, you'll need to map your supply chain. It's so crucial. So where you buy your goods, where you sell your goods, and your suppliers, because that's the critical point here. The cross-border trader and many of the businesses in Ireland have a very highly integrated supply chain. So they might think they're fine. The Northern Ireland Protocol says no paperwork cross-border, but really if they go down into the supply chain, you could find that a lot of components may come from either jurisdiction. So map the supply chain and map the trade flow of your goods. And then that will lead you into what kind of customs you need. Obviously you'll register for the trader support service, but also data then becomes really important. Your EORI number, your commodity codes, there are things you can do to help you with that, and identify what kind of customs you will need. And again, you're looking at things like terms of trade, Incoterms, who's the importer of record. There are details and things, but these are all things that you can do now. And the other thing that I would say, certainly when you're looking at your goods, is maybe have a look around at the labels that you have. So CE marking, there's an agreement there, they'll be okay for another year, but things like conformity assessments, and you know, if you've got a product that is signed off by a notified body in the opposite jurisdiction, there's a piece of work to be done there. So check your labels, check your goods, check your trade flow, and map your supply chain. The financial side of things, the currency, the hedging, how you invoice, where your bank accounts are, the jurisdiction of your company, all of that. And then finally, on the services side of things, I know I'm rushing here and there's not a lot of information, but on the services side of things, I'd say check your data flow. So GDPR is one that is open-ended here. We're still waiting to see if there'll be an adequacy decision on it. So map your data, know where your risks are. And again, there are things you can do with data. You can put international clauses in your contracts. And then also as well, sort of, you know, if there's anybody in your business with a qualification that is crossing jurisdiction, be mindful that you might have to register in Ireland to do that. And the other thing then as well is the people in your business. So if you've got employees who are coming from the European Union and EEA national, you may need to register for the EU settlement scheme post-immigration. So they're all things that you can and should be looking at now. So it's mitigate your risk, and then obviously you can seek support to do that. And then there are many ways, and I can sort of brief you on that if you like.
Yeah, that'd be great.
You
Yeah, the support. Yeah, please.
So some things you can do yourself. One thing I've done is I've registered for the government transition site. So it's government.uk/transition. And every day I'll get an update on what's happening. You know, so if they've added a new thing from the negotiations, they'll update that site. And I have found that really useful for me. I would encourage you also to look at the Ireland government and the Brexit Readiness Action Plan, because if you do have an integrated supply chain, or you are a cross-border trader, and the chances are that your goods or your trade flow is coming through the land bridge, it's crossing on jurisdictions, it's good to know what's happening on both sides. So I'd encourage you to look at that. So they're the two things. Supports is the digital stuff. You've got Brexit 2020, it's an Intrade Ireland site. I'm happy to share the links to that. Lots of digital learning and information on that. And then finally, the other things I would say are go to webinars, get informed, go to as many of them as you can. If you can't do it, ask somebody else in your business to do it. And then the kind of financial supports, for example, Intrade Ireland they've got a £2,000 worth of consultancy support. And you can use that in any of those things that I mentioned, basically in your customs and your services, your GDPR, getting customs training, checking your commodity codes, mapping your supply chain, all of that. And it's cross-border traders, kind of an SME is the criteria for that. And also there's a COVID support, which is running alongside that. And it's, I think you need to look at both of them together, because for COVID, anybody who has potentially planned Brexit before, their margins might be different. The number of people they have on site might be different. So you can do two things. You can have a look at your COVID risk, and you can have a look at your Brexit risk. And they're both £2,000 worth each. So that's the financial support. And then the other thing I wanted to mention was, I said I'd mention Investia, and I have a couple of webinars coming up. They've got one coming up on people, so the EU settlement scheme. They've one coming up on data, which will be really good for a business. I think it's a crucial one for businesses to have a look at, because everybody has data that flows somewhere. And then they have another one coming up in VAT, and they're all coming up in September. And they have an EU readiness checker as well. So summarize, it's just mitigate, plan, look, identify your risk and mitigate it, and just use all the supports you can.
Well, Deirdre, what we'll do after the session is we link up with yourself and we get those links for our members that we can send out with the video of today's session, which would be really useful, because you covered quite a lot of supports there. So thanks a million for that. Trevor, I was wondering, could I come back to you just to talk about, you've been involved in developing an online supply chain support material for businesses in preparation for Brexit. I was wondering, could you take us through a little bit of that, and how we could access that, and how our members could access that, because that seems like a very valuable resource tool as well.
Okay, Paul, there's two different places that it can be found, because I did some work with Intertrade Ireland, as Deirdre's aware, and that's the Brexit 2020 resources that in there. There's a number of different mini modules and advice for firms on how to go about mapping their supply chain, understanding sourcing risk, understanding risk strategies, etc. So that'll come as part of the either links I provide or Deirdre will provide after, but we'll do that as a team. That's on the Intertrade website. The other is on manisupplychain.com, which is the manufacturing ANI. And that was a partnership that we had with them, supported by the UK government, to develop 10 bite-sized modules for getting supply chain ready for Brexit. And that goes into more detail around a number of the modules, and that it provides a suite of tools as well. So as well as a 2-3 minute video at the outset to help firms understand the terminology within supply chains and what the key issues are. It then gives a number of tools, like audit tools or risk assessment tools, that firms can do within their business in order to assess the areas that they need to focus on. But also it gives a number of potential strategies that firms could use, because it's okay filling in a form and saying, okay, I get 6 out of 10 on this, or I'm low on my flexibility, or I've got a risk in my tier 2 supplier because they're not covered by a free trade agreement, and they're not covered by East-West. And then this gives some ideas of what firms may do in order to explore that. And another key area in there is contracting. And the contracting, again, the themes are coming through, because what are firms signed up to now for current contracts? How is that going to affect them with currency fluctuations? What future contracts are they in conversation with at the moment, and the potential impact of that? So I guess it's a range of supply chain tools. The good news is that firms can look at the 10 areas that are available there and delve into which is most relevant to them at the time, and take that knowledge away, apply it to their business, and it's there available for them.
Okay, lovely stuff. Andrew, could I just come on to you there, because I believe you had delved into some of that in preparation for today. And I guess the question really is about, you know, where do you access your information at the moment, and how did you find the interaction with what Trevor just?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges that people like myself and a lot of businesses will have is is managing and filtering the amount of information and amount of tools and amount of things that we should and can be looking at. And I think Trevor's last point there about making it relevant to your own business is going to be key. It's making sure that you're not. I don't think many of us are going to have an awful lot of capacity over the next few months for wasted time and wasted work and effort. So really mapping out ourselves for our own businesses, what is valuable work and where we should be looking. So I did look through Trevor's tool. It's really, really good from a manufacturing point of view and very relevant to that. And it does help you filter out some of the maybe external noise is not relevant. So if Seamus was talking about, agri-food and problem, I don't have that problem, so I'm not going to expend an awful lot of energy, other than my customers will have that problem, but it's not maybe something that I'm going to expend too much energy on, because I have to manage both my business's capacity and my own through what is going to be a very, very difficult challenge. And that, I think, is going to be key. And so where do I get my information? Places like manufacturing, and I think the Chamber is a very good generic place to gather information for the Northwest specifically, and I think that's what the Chambers will do a very good job for, and we'll hear a lot of national information, but it's much more useful to have it what's very relevant to ourselves, and to try and filter through that.
Brilliant, Andrew. Thanks so much for that. Seamus, could I direct a question to you? I have a question that came in prior to the session, and I have some questions I'm going to go through as well that appeared up on the screen. The question that was sent was: I know there are differences between the export declarations and the exit summary declarations, but I would like some clarity on what information is needed for each of these, so that I can prepare my internal systems to be able to generate this information quickly. Where can I get this, or can I see examples of what is needed of each? I don't know. Is that something you could have a stab at answering?
Really, what in essence, there's a lot of confusion around what an export summary declaration and what an exit declaration is. An exit declaration isn't a customs clearance document. It's simply basically a means of stock check. So currently, usually when goods leave the EU single market, an exit summary declaration is completed in conjunction with an export summary. But because we don't need customs for goods leaving NI going to GB, the terms of the withdrawal agreement stipulate that the Union Customs Code must be adhered to. And this created some confusion, because some people then in government on the political side says, well, we didn't agree to any formalities, any paperwork on goods leaving NI to GB. But when you actually look at factually the withdrawal agreement, it says the Union Customs Code is adhered to, and the Union Customs Code say you must account for what leaves the single market. So what it is, basically, the exit summary declaration, it is the commodity code, the volume, and where it's going to and when. Really, there's no standard form for that. When I look at examples of countries that use them at the moment, like Finland would use them for goods leaving by road transport going to Russia, for example, there's maybe about 30 odd questions, like a tick box exercise. The ferry companies here said they could incorporate it into their booking system for goods leaving, but ultimately what it gives the EU the data to know exactly what goods are leaving the single market and where are they going to. So if there's 100 million tons of beef produced annually within the EU, they can see where it's going to. And that's why, if we didn't have anything recording what's leaving Northern Ireland, there's this hole basically in the data where there's some stuff leaving the single market and it's unaccounted for, and that's why the EU are sticking steadfast to that. If you want to find out what is required for an export declaration, probably if you go to the Institute of Export, the Institute of Export's website is quite good. It shows you, or even with yourselves, Paul, I'm not too sure, maybe if you have examples of the customs declarations, but in essence, we shouldn't need an export declaration for goods leaving Northern Ireland to go into either GB or indeed we definitely need them for goods going to the EU. Okay,
thank you very much for that. Look, I have another question here. Some articles this week reporting banks have written to customers in Europe, not resident in the UK, may need to have close their accounts. In our region, we have many staff residing in ROI. Does the panel have any further details? So I'm not sure if we are in a position to answer that question now, but it's more about the banks. I'll just read it out. Some articles this week reporting banks have written to customers in Europe not resident in the UK may need to close their accounts. In our region, we have many staff residing in ROI. Does the panel have any further detail? Not sure if anybody can answer that. It's certainly one that we can try as a chamber to come and get some more clarity on that for the participant there who's asked that question. And
I don't think anybody knows the answer to that one yet, Paul. I mean,
okay.
Financial services are a huge part of the negotiations between the European Union and the UK. In fact, they're one of the biggest parts of the puzzle here. So, and some of the banks, you know, the financial services passport, and it's a huge topic, and there really isn't. There's no deal with that yet. Yeah.
Okay.
So this is probably part of the banks mitigating the risk.
Okay. Okay, Deirdre, thanks very much for that. Another question there was, how have your colleagues reacted to recent comments by the UK government that the EU would impose a food blockade between Northern Ireland and Great Britain, which the EU and Irish government have rejected as untrue? I mean,
I suppose I'll jump in there first, Paul.
Yeah.
I think that was a bit of a red herring, completely. There is no blockade threatened. We had a meeting last week with the EU ambassador to the UK, João de Almeida. I think he was up in the northwest actually on Friday or Saturday.
Yeah, we met him as well, actually, is it?
Yeah. And before that, we looked at the reason why I think some press picked up on this blockade thing is because third country listing wasn't given to the UK by the EU as yet. But you need this basically to get the listing. You have to give details of the regime that you will have in place for the manufacture of food products. It's standard procedure for every country in the world. And what has happened basically is that the UK government has not yet advised the EU of the regime that will be in place. Now, it will be a copy and paste of the current one that they have with the EU, but they haven't done it yet. So as the EU have said, listen, how can we grant something that we haven't been asked for yet? So the UK have just to go and that's a formality. So that's not a genuine threat, I think, for trade here.
Okay, very good. Thanks.
Paul, maybe just on that, there's going to be an awful lot of this kind of political posturing going on with newspapers jump into and jump out of, and maybe going back to something I said earlier, where it's important not to expend too much energy on stuff like that's going to, you know, could cause a lot of anxiety, could cause a lot of unproductive stress time and emotional energy to used up, and I think that's all going to be part of this roller coaster ride, is to try and manage our levels that way and really try to delve into what is important and what's not.
And the other issue though about regulated products and things like that, labelling chemicals and things like that, I don't know if there's anybody in the panel to review on maybe some shortages on those types of things like drugs and things like that, if there's new labelling rules. I know some calls I've been on have raised that, you know, that train has even left the station in some cases because of the shortage of time. I don't know if you have any view on that, and is there any concern to be had there? Maybe Trevor, if you wanted to jump in there.
I just broader than that in terms of capacity in general and the pharmaceutical industry, I guess. There is, I suppose, a severe threat that as we move towards the 1st of January and the uncertainty that comes with that firms will try and get as much stock in place before that, which will lead to maybe a spike in demand now, because of the fear that post-January, with all the data that's required and the information from the various aspects of the supply chain, with the customs declaration and the safety and security documentation, that it may lead to a spike and a kind of an issue within the supply chain before that. The second thing, I guess, is that we're seeing some companies are starting to near shore again, as they call it. So they're looking at their supply chains and to mitigate that risk again. They're trying to get suppliers closer to home, and that will mitigate that. Partly that's because of the Brexit scenario, and partly there's an undercurrent there with the sustainability agenda as well, and trying to do more local. So we might find a change in how companies operate, and the business model that they use as well around that.
Very good. Deirdre, anything else you'd like to add in there on that topic in general?
No, I suppose basically is a reference to really what Andrew was saying there is, you know, for a business here, just don't get caught up in the noise, don't lose your focus, do what you can, know where your risks are going to be, and, you know, definitely stockpiling was a big thing early on when we last had a no deal. I do think it's going to be probably another one again, but also impacted by COVID. So I would just say keep focused to a business and, you know, do the best you can and you'll get through it.
Very good, Deirdre. Just another question that came in there. Government has, with the internal market, stated that exit declarations won't be needed for NI to GB. Do the panelists feel this is a bluff, and will we likely need to complete these?
I
Seamus?
suppose I'll jump in first. Paul, I think it's going back to what was agreed in the withdrawal agreement, whether it's full outrage or not. I think the problem with having absolutely no formalities on goods from here to GB, and the HMRC have said this, is that how do you identify what is a Northern Ireland origin and what is a Northern Ireland qualifying good when it arrives into GB? Because if you don't have a way of recording those goods, what's to stop me as a business taking goods from elsewhere in the EU into Northern Ireland and then putting them on the lorry and selling them to a customer in England? So that there will have to be something. I think we're playing politics at the moment. I would probably rather, if I was to opt now, I would take a simplified exit declaration that can be done electronically, booking with the ferry company. The fear is if it's unregulated, that we see probably issues being raised in GB, maybe not next year, maybe in a couple of years' time, with NI goods entering the GB market, and then you face a harsher regime of export declarations and potentially even quotas. Yeah,
and just moving back to you, Trevor, there, you mentioned about the preparedness of business, I suppose, from a digital perspective, and there's a fairly startling statistic. I'm just wondering, how can businesses prepare, these small businesses prepare for the amount of data? I think you described it as the data is the new oil. And I mean, obviously, so much is going to be done this virtually and online. Do you think businesses are prepared, and what can they do to get themselves better prepared, I guess, between now and the end of the year?
Yeah, I think the first thing is that, as I said at the outset, businesses are wrestling with COVID right now, and therefore, in some of the recent studies by Intertrade and ourselves, that 50 to 60% of businesses haven't really started to do anything on Brexit, and sometimes it's to do with not knowing what to do, and sometimes, as Andrew said, there's so much out there that you just want to pick the things that give you the most bang for your buck. If you're an SME and you're doing 14, 15 hours a day, you really don't want to spend 1 or 2 or 3 hours doing something that may be a waste of time. So the critical thing is leveraging the resources that are out there from the likes of Intertrade and Invest NI, who are giving useful webinars and giving useful resources to help people understand this, and obviously bodies like Seamus as well, and particularly in around the logistics side of it. It's going to be really useful for firms to, and maybe that's where the like of the Brexit vouchers come in, and the support schemes, is that businesses use that as a resource to help them come into their organization, understand, well, okay, what supply chains do I have, and therefore what products go along that, what data do I need at each point, where is the data now, where can I get it, and how can I develop that into even linking into the ferry companies with electronic information. So it's really back to mapping your product flows, knowing what data you have, what you don't have, and what you need, and then setting an action plan about getting that with the resources and support that's there to help businesses do that, because they don't simply have the time to do that on their own.
Oh, Trevor, thanks a million for that.
Oh, can I just add a wee thing in here? Just a practical thing, really. Yeah. Get your commodity codes if you're a business. You can do that. You can do it online. And if you're worried and you have a crucial product, one of your strategic products, you can get a binding tariff. You can actually get your commodity code almost approved. So, and you can apply for all these things online. So that is something that you or somebody in your business could do today. Go in and get your commodity codes, and that's a piece of your data, and you can check them and then engage with your logistics.
Dear, thanks very much for that solid bit of advice there. Just before we wrap up, I'm just going through the questions. I think we covered off the questions from, largely anyway, from the panelists or from the attendees this morning as well. But I just wanted to run maybe to you, Andrew, first in our summary. Was there anything you'd like to add in there? Just as a final few words.
Well, I suppose it might have been maybe more in the form of a question to some of them as to where do we think Northern Ireland stands? I know Seamus in our slight rehearsal yesterday a little bit, you alluded to the fact that there's still a chance that Northern Ireland could come out of this quite well, as in being in the best of both worlds. Where does that stand at the minute, and is there still a chance that could happen? Sorry to put a question in rather than answer.
No, that's fine, and that's what the forum is for. And thanks very much. I think was it Seamus you touched on that yesterday, and
yeah, I land really on a positive note, and it's about basically our unfettered access. What our two objectives need to be is unfettered access to GB, huge. It's our biggest market. But also what the protocol gives is unfettered access to and from the EU, and that's right across. That's not just selling something in the Donegal, but selling something to Dubrovnik. And what we got to look at basically is how we continue to move those goods. So if I'm a business in Derry today, from the 1st of January, I can move a pallet of goods from Italy, and I'll use Italy. I remember years ago shipping stuff, ice cream wafers from Italy into Derry quite often. But I'll simply get that pallet picked up in Italy. My supplier in Italy will raise what's called a transit accompanying document. This is the only piece of paper that will exist with customs. Everything else is digital. But the transit document will be attached to that pallet. When that pallet arrives into Dover in the back of the lorry, HMRC Customs will look at it and they'll go, okay, there's no tariffs or no checks applicable on this because it's actually staying within the EU single market. It's going to Northern Ireland. So it clocks in at Dover, clocks out in Cairnryan when it leaves there, and it comes in. And it means basically those goods, you haven't had to pay tariffs or any checks in it. Meanwhile, a company imported the exact same product who might be based in Liverpool are having to pay a tariff, whatever that might be. It might be zero if there's a decent trade agreement, but they'll still have to do an import declaration for that, whereas you won't have to do an import declaration and you won't have to pay customs. So that's an advantage for us, and it works the other direction as well. We can send stuff. And even if you ship the stuff direct to Europe, let's say it goes via Dublin, you don't even need to raise a transit accompanying document. So we have a great advantage. And I sat in a webinar last week, Paul, with East Lancashire Chamber of Commerce. And when the businesses heard about this, they were like, "What? The protocol sounds brilliant for you guys. We wish we had it." So I think we spent and Andrew's touched about it. The negativity out there, both politically and in some elements of the press, we've got to focus on the positives we can gain from this as well.
Well, look, that's a fabulous thing. And Andrew, thanks so much for bringing that point up. It was timely and coming close to the end of the webinar. Deirdre, would you like to add any final words in there before I come to Seamus maybe, and finally finish off with Trevor then?
Always good to end on a positive note, and I don't want to diminish that. So my advice is take some action if you haven't already, because you're going to need to do a bit of work here to get through this, and you will, and there may be positives, but the more you do now, the better you'll be prepared and avail of all the support. So yeah, so thank you.
Seamus, I guess you endorse that as well. Be prepared. Do your homework.
Yeah.
And
have your commodity codes, your packaging details. Speak to your logistics provider. Are they on the ball with this? And finally, register for the Trader Support Service. If you just go into Google and put in basically HMRC Trader Support Service, there's actually a link where you can register. You put in your contact details, and they'll keep you up to date with it, then how you can avail of the service. And it's been officially launched next week as well.
Brilliant. That's great. That's great. And Trevor, maybe come to you finally for a little pearl of wisdom that's going to leave everybody in a nice, fluffy, happy state before we sign off. No pressure then.
No pressure at all. I think it's just looking at the opportunities that are out there. Think about controllables and uncontrollables, And at the moment, if businesses focus on what they can control, actually you can turn that into an opportunity. And Seamus says Northern Ireland is primed. We're ready to go. We've got the experience. We've got the people, the talent, and we've got the products to be global and go global. So it's trying to embrace that and see the opportunity.
Trevor, thanks a million for that. Look, I am just in summary, I'd like to thank everybody for your participation today and all the attendees who joined as well. We will be sending this out as a recording to the rest of our members, and any questions that we didn't get to today, we will endeavour to get back to our members on that. So on behalf of the Chamber, I would really like to thank Andrew, Trevor, Seamus and Deirdre for their individual updates. The Chamber really greatly appreciates your continued support. And as I say, we will be sending out a recorded copy. So on this webinar, we heard a lot of the practical steps that you and your business can take to prepare for Brexit. And we obviously don't have a clear view of the final outcome, but we will endeavour to keep you up to date as we get closer to the end of January. We heard things like, and I've learned stuff today, data is the new oil. We're going to hashtag that. That's a new thing now. Have you patented that, Trevor? I think you'll have to patent that one. We've heard about 5 a day. We've heard about import declarations, trading goods and services, map your supplier chain. We've talked about but also, I mean, the main message really is the opportunity that is there. If we can get our ducks in a row and get ourselves well organized, we really have a great opportunity here if we embrace this change as well, if we can get the right deal, which we hope our politicians will get for us as well. Don't forget about the links that Deirdre touched on in terms of the links to the supports that are available there. We're here as a member organisation, we're here to try and support you through that. As a summary, we will send the links from the individual participants here as an email with the recording to you, so you can link into those things. And if you need any information, please feel free to contact us at any time and we'll try and point you in the right direction. So without further ado, I'd just like to thank the panel again for your valued contribution, and we hope to have you again, maybe 75 days, 50 days, 25 days. As we get a bit more clarity, as we get closer to the D-Day, I'm sure more things will become more apparent for us, and we keep our members informed. So again, thanks very much for your time and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.